In the full scope of alchemy, there are different schools, approaches, lineages. We can make many distinctions. In Chinese alchemy, there is a fundamental distinction between inner and outer schools. European alchemy has largely been of the outer, external type, laboratory alchemy, at least until Jung explored and exposed inner dimensions through the lens of modern psychology. The alchemical tradition in the broader European context is rich and diverse. There are three, perhaps four, main streams of theory and practice. They are not always distinct, and there is overlap between them, especially in regards processes, but it is not inaccurate to describe them as streams or schools, three broad groupings of theory and practice. There is a fourth school, and you find it in European alchemy, but it is more developed in other alchemical traditions. It is never fully established in Europe, or it is limited. So in Europe, there are essentially three schools, but we can also talk of a fourth. The most familiar and celebrated type of alchemy is what we might label metallic alchemy. This is a school or stream or tradition of laboratory alchemy dedicated to the transmutation of metals, and specifically of lead into gold, base metals into precious metals. Its materials are the metals, and its methods are adapted from metallurgy. This is what is commonly understood as alchemy, gold making. Since it was focused upon the production of gold, this school won the patronage of kings and the wealthy. It was very quickly populated by charlatans. But there is a legitimate tradition. One of its principal texts is the Summa Perfectionis, the Summary of Perfection. As well as metallic, we might also label this the Perfectionis stream of alchemy, the alchemy of metals. In a sense, it is the core tradition. Its roots are very ancient as metallurgy itself. Essentially, this is the alchemy of the blacksmith. But metallic alchemy was not native to Europe, it was imported into Europe. Intellectual exotica, a new technology sought by kings and the powerful. The second stream of alchemy in the European context is the alchemy associated with Paracelsus. This stream very deliberately distinguished itself from the metallic alchemy. Paracelsus himself wrote, quote, "Many have said of alchemy that it is for making gold and silver. For me such is not the aim, but to consider only what virtue and power might lie in medicines." Unquote. We can also call this the spagaric alchemy, since its laboratory practice is focused upon the production of spagarics and tinctures. Rather than metallic, this is a herbal alchemy. It is almost entirely devoted to herbs and is essentially a medical tradition. Instead of the pursuit of gold, Paracelsian alchemy is concerned with health, longevity, and ultimately immortality. This has been a very productive and influential stream, especially in the Germanic world. The metallic stream might be the most famed and notorious, but the Paracelsian stream has made the deepest impression upon European culture. It has established some sort of practical legitimacy. It has influenced a wide range of healing therapies such as Western herbalism, homeopathy, anthroposophical medicine, and naturopathy, as well as making indirect contributions to conventional or allopathic medicine. Today, it is the most widely practiced form of laboratory alchemy in the Western world. In other traditions, that of Tibetan Buddhism, for example, medical and metallic alchemies never fell into distinct streams. This bifurcation is very characteristic of alchemy in the European context. Paracelsian alchemy has independent roots deep in European and pre-Christian herbalism, but it is largely a reaction to the degradation of the metallic tradition. The metallic tradition became corrupted very quickly with puffers and pretenders. It became associated with greed. It was patronized by royalty, the royal art, but for ignoble purposes, the pursuit of wealth and power. Paracelsian alchemy is a reaction to that. In some ways, it is a folk alchemy. It reflects the decline of the royal houses of Europe after the French Revolution and the rise of a more democratic order. Metals are for wealthy people, herbs are for the common people. That's its general political background in the modern era. In some ways, Paracelsian alchemy is a uniquely European alchemy. It has a claim to being a native alchemy to Europe, whereas metallic alchemy was imported, and while it became widespread, it cannot be said to have flourished, not as a spiritual art. That's an important thing to understand about European alchemy. The transplant of alchemical knowledge into Europe was not entirely successful. The fullest integration of a metallic alchemy was in stained glass making during the age of cathedrals. Later manifestations were corrupt, but gave rise to Paracelsian alchemy, which was more native and had more noble outcomes. The third and least known of the streams is associated with a book called the Mutus Liber, the Silent Book, which is a book consisting of a series of enigmatic pictures without any explanatory text. Unlike the metallic stream, which pursues gold, and the Paracelsian stream, which pursues the universal medicine, the Mutus Liber stream is almost entirely concerned with prima materia, first matter. And rather than metals or herbs, the materials used in this alchemy are typically the exudations of nature. The objective is to extract prima materia from base substances, humus, dew, urine, tears, blood, manures, compost. Mutus Liber alchemy rarely uses herbs or metals. This was a minority stream, but sometimes attracted public attention because of its preoccupation with gross materials. One alchemist in Prague became notorious for paying pubescent boys for their urine in the belief their bodily wastes were a source of prima materia. These sort of antics brought alchemy into disrepute. Yet the Mutus Liber stream is a profound alchemy that in some ways foreshadows Einsteinian physics, since the very basis of this alchemy is the identity of energy and matter. Rudolf Steiner's very successful system of biodynamic agriculture, with its potentized preparations made from cow manure and bark fermented in skulls, horns and animal organs, is also a modern alchemical development typical of the Mutus Liber stream. Different streams of alchemy are adapted to different environments. Paracelsian alchemy prospered in Germanic Europe, where its raw materials, herbs, are abundant. Metallic alchemy tends to correlate with the geography of mining. The Mutus Liber tradition is more agricultural. There is a fourth stream distinguishable in European alchemy, although it was far more prolific in Arab and Persian environments, and its position was always tenuous in the West. We might call this the Perfumer's tradition, for it was principally concerned with the extraction of essences and the preparation of incenses, perfumes, and attars. It penetrates into southern Europe to some extent, but it is not as illustrious in Europe as the metallic and Paracelsian streams or even the Mutus Liber tradition. It is an Oriental tradition essentially. Its raw materials are spices and fragrant resins, things not abundant in the European environment. There was an abundance of cow manure in Europe, but a shortage of frankincense. And European herbs are more medicinal than fragrant. After all, Europeans sailed the world and waged wars for fragrant spices, because they didn't have any. Perfumer's alchemy, if we can call it that, moved into Europe from the Orient, especially to southern France, primarily as part of the medieval revolution associated with courtly love and a culture of mannered nobility. In the late medieval and early modern periods, Europeans eagerly acquired perfumes and a perfumed culture. Christianity was previously pretty smelly. After the Crusades brought new contacts with the East, the nobility wanted perfumes. There was an alchemy that came with those perfumes. The symbolism of this alchemy is essentially erotic. Its focus is the hierogamos, the sacred marriage. In modern times, of course, this stream has degenerated into the perfume industry that makes synthetic industrial perfumes for the profane love of the nouveau riche. Erotic symbolism is found in the other streams as well, but the alchemy of perfumery is especially erotic, and so its objective is union, marriage, the union of opposites, the conjunctio oppositorum. This is its vehicle, its setting, we might say. Again, these streams can share processes and symbolism, but there is a different emphasis in each, largely because of their different raw materials. The perfumer's alchemy is natural to warmer climes because that is where the raw materials are found. Or we might also say it is a very solar alchemy. It is concerned with resins and oils. It is an alchemy of oils. Plants make oils from light, heat, the sun. Only some areas of Europe have enough sunlight. Mediterranean Europe, lavender cultivation in the Provence. The remnants of this stream are in France, not in Germany. Paracelsian alchemy had a formative impact upon natural medicine in the Germanic world. In France, aromatherapy is the most popular and the dominant, we might almost say the national, mode of natural therapy. This fact reflects the penetration of a perfumer's alchemy into the history of French culture. The perfumer's tradition is primarily concerned with plant sources because that is where the fragrant substances are found. All parts of the plant, including barks like sandalwood, but also exudates. Some exudates have potent fragrant properties, including animal exudates, such as musk from the sexual glands of animals. Nevertheless, this stream is actually wider and richer than just perfumery. It also includes the production of dyes, for example. Metals and minerals might be used in those processes, as well as an alchemy of scent. This is an alchemy of colour. In Eastern traditions, dyeing has a spiritual significance. In many texts, even in the Quran, baptism, spiritual initiation, is compared to being dyed. The aspirant is dipped in water like a cloth being dipped into a dye and emerges a new colour. Colours and scents are natural products of a sun-rich world. Symbolisms of colour and scent, often interchangeable, are typical of this stream of alchemy. The heart of the ancient perfumer's alchemy was Egypt, and by extension, Arabia Felix. It also extends into the ancient Greek world. Later it spreads through Islamic lands, Persia especially. In Egypt it was above all connected to the funerary arts, mummification and embalming. This is the other dimension of this stream. The other side of sex is death. The Mutus Liber tradition may have certain necromantic preoccupations, delving into decay. The perfumer's alchemy was connected with cults of death and resurrection. Death itself is regarded as the sacred marriage, a theme later developed in Sufism especially. At the same time, the perfumer's clientele extends to courtesans and prostitutes, ladies of the night. In fact, in some phases, in some places, this tradition is preserved and encoded in that underworld. In the Far Eastern traditions, where raw materials are also plentiful, the alchemy of perfume was developed in a different context. Taoism is inherently alchemical in its modes and incorporated scent in the form of joss as the characteristic method of Taoist devotion. Taoism, which is like an open esotericism, explicitly understands joss in terms of an alchemical cosmology. The burning of incense as a refined liturgy is a part of this alchemical tradition. To understand the perfumer's alchemy, we need to appreciate an altogether forgotten aspect of the traditional cosmology. It is something about which modern people have no inkling whatsoever, namely that the divine realm inhales, smells, imbibes the mortal realm. The gods have an acute sense of smell. Thus does sweet-smelling incense please them. Thus do devotees bathe and perfume before attending a temple. The whole point of joss is to please the gods with sweet scent. And when fruit and offerings are placed upon an altar, the gods receive them through their aroma. The gods don't eat them as such, they smell them. This is how the offering is made. It was once widely believed that fragrances and attars attract angels and dispel evil spirits. I dare say it's a long time since theologians discoursed upon how God smells the world. Conversely, the divine is a fragrance. You can smell the divine presence. It is an aroma, a scent. This symbolism pervades Islamic spirituality especially, although it is the symbolism of Second Temple Judaism and other spiritual environments. Thus is the Kaaba in Mecca washed out with rose water, and thus too do perfumers like Attar of Nishapur count among the great saints of Islam, poets of an alchemy of divine love. Some theophanies are visual, a vision, or auditory, a voice, but the divine more commonly as a fragrance, a scent that permeates. This is directly related to other aspects of Islamic spirituality, memory as spiritual method. In this view, man falls into forgetfulness and forgets the divine. To know the divine is to remember. Prayer is dhikr, remembrance. It is a strongly Platonic theme. To sense the divine fragrance is also a remembering. We remember scents and smells. A scent can carry us back to our childhood in an instant. That is its magic. It can transport us. Fragrance is important in this context because among our senses, olfaction is directly connected to memory. Scent is the key to a spirituality of remembrance, and remembrance is the key to the perfumer's alchemy. Perfumes operate through the deepest, most primal olfactory centers of the brain. This is an alchemy that works through the recollection of archetypes. The vehicle of alchemical perfumery is pneuma, spiritus. Let us consider a rudimentary example of this alchemy's praxis in the form of an attar, an essential oil. The attar is very likely made for a particular case. It is then applied to the body at specific places: the wrists, the folds of the elbow, on the neck behind the ears, and behind the knees. These positions are the 4 points where the arteries of the body are near the surface. They are the best places to take a pulse. That is, attar is applied to the pulse. This is an important secret in this alchemy. Attars are applied not to the skin, but to the blood. They are active in the blood. The internal alchemy of attars concerns their activity through the blood. Attars are activated by 3 things: the heat of the body, synergy with body chemistry, and succussion, the pulse. Typically, attars and fragrances are calculated as either warm or cool, but also dry, moist, and other qualities, elemental or planetary. Musk, saffron, amber are warm. Rose is a cool fragrance. There is no heat in the rose. The more pure the attar of rose, the more it congeals into crystals. Jasmine is a cold fragrance too. The perfumer's alchemy consists of a deep knowledge of these properties and their influence on the body and the subtle body and the mind. It is as psycho-spiritual as it is physical. Often, for instance, an attar will be calculated to stir particular levels of memory. Only a dim and degraded understanding of any of this remains in modern industrial perfumery or in aromatherapy, where it is hopelessly sentimentalized. The motif found at the heart of the perfumer's alchemy is the mythic bird of the phoenix. We can only mention it here. It deserves a full account on its own. It is enough here to say that it is so closely identified with this 4th tradition that wherever in traditional sources we encounter the phoenix and related myths, we are almost always crossing paths with this stream of alchemy in some iteration. Everything we have already noted about this tradition comes together in the single symbol of the phoenix. For example, the phoenix is preeminently a solar bird in all accounts. In its central myth, it regenerates periodically by building a nest of spices, fragrant woods, and resins. The bird becomes so soaked in oils that it is able to self-immolate, whereupon it is reborn from the ashes, either directly or through an egg. The bird is said to live in Arabia Felix, but flies to Heliopolis in Egypt, the city of the sun, to build its nest. The name itself, phoenix, most likely comes from Phoenicia and alludes to the famed purple dye of majesty. Both scent and colour are combined here, perfume and dye. The bird becomes soaked in resins and oils, and so becomes stained and multicoloured. Accounts differ. Most say the colours of the sun, of fire, red, blue, purple. Other accounts say variegated, equivalent to the peacock's tail, known in other alchemical schools. In any case, the bird is dyed a vibrant colour. In all respects, its legend brings together all the relevant elements of the perfumer's alchemy. To understand that tradition, therefore, We need to understand the legends of the phoenix, trace their permutations and penetrate to their inner symbolic meanings. To trace the hidden movements of this stream of alchemy in Europe, the place to start is to make a study of the iconography of the phoenix and its appearance and transformations, its adaptations and disguises in various folklores, and in Christian stories as well, and such places as troubadour poetry and love songs. Where it is adapted into a Judeo-Christian context, it is Solomonic. It uses the divinely sanctioned eroticism of Solomon as its framework. We should remember that the Song of Solomon was the most popular text of the entire Christian Middle Ages. The peculiar fragmentation of alchemy in Europe into distinct schools was both a strength and a weakness. Since alchemy is a practical rather than a theoretical spirituality, its advancement is restricted and defined by the availability of necessary materials. This shapes its history in Europe to an uncommon degree. We can understand, therefore, why the perfumer's alchemy was never deeply rooted in the European context, but was more connected to trade and conquest. It was always, to some extent, exotic. Even so, in the monkish norms of Christianity, where chastity is virtue and marriage is a concession to nature, an alchemy whose central symbolism is erotic union was always going to be problematic. It is not the right soil. We must nevertheless take account of it if we want a full picture of the Western alchemical tradition and all its schools and lineages. The fourth school was not unimportant, but not as naturalized and as fully realized in Europe as the metallic, herbal and mutus liber schools.